My name is Rosalind Kessler, and I was 34 the winter my mother gave my engagement party away in a room I owned. 411 Sedgwick Street. The front parlor, pocket doors open, 75 chairs in rows. 7:30 on a Saturday night, 15 days before the 9th of March. My mother texted me that morning. Come at 7:30, after the toasts, so the room is settled. I came at 7:30. The toasts were over and none of them had been mine. My mother stood at the mantel with a glass in her hand and told the seated room, "The front parlor is for the daughter who married properly." I didn't sit down. I stood behind the last row for 9 minutes. But here's what my mother didn't know about that house. Somebody handed me a gray envelope at a funeral 9 years ago, and I never read past the first page. 9 weeks later, my mother would need a ride to go look at an apartment by the river. If you are the one they call when the furnace quits at 4 in the morning, and the one they seat at the back when the room is full, this story was built for you. You pay, and then you stand. Tell me in the comments what town you're listening from. Then subscribe, because the piece of paper my mother didn't know about takes a while to arrive, and I want you here when it does. The pocket doors take both hands and a shoulder, and somebody had already opened them. 75 people, seated, facing my mother. There was one folding chair left at the very back, and it had a tag wired to the leg, a stiff buff card the size of a playing card, punched at one corner, soft wire, the number 41 stamped on it in black. A tag on a thing means the thing belongs to somebody who is coming for it. That is what I thought, and I thought it about the chair. Royce Pruitt had delivered 80 of them that morning, and Royce is tidy about his inventory. I was right about the sentence. I was wrong about which thing, and I was wrong about which somebody. Emmett Doyle was by the coat pile with his cap off, holding it by the brim, turning it a quarter turn at a time. His mother and father had driven 310 miles from Marshalltown to meet the family. They were in the second row of a bridal shower for a woman they had never met. Nobody had told them either. They drove home the same night. Ledyard is 9,000 people on the Wabash side of the county. One traffic light. A brick glove factory with the name still ghosted on the north wall. The houses on Sedgwick Street were built for foremen in the 1900s, and they have been sinking politely ever since. Ours had radiators that knock twice and then settle, and the whole place smelled like the cedar closet under the stairs. I paid the taxes on it. I paid for the roof, the furnace, the water heater. I never once called that a favor. I called it the taxes and the roof, the way you'd name the weather. And I said thank you to people while they were hurting me, and for 11 years I called that tidiness. It was not tidiness. My mother put 2 fingers to the base of her throat, just below the notch, the way she does before she says the kindest-sounding version of a hard thing. "It's a family arrangement," she said. "Nobody's taking anything from anybody." The room laughed a little, because it is a nice thing to say. My sister Bianca laughed one syllable, no smile with it, and touched her ring with her thumb. Dwayne Fry tapped his ring hand twice on a chair back and said somebody in this family has to hem the dresses, and the room laughed harder. Junie was in the doorway, 9 years old, standing on the outside edges of her shoes. Jimena Ruelas came through with a tray and stepped wide around the leg of that chair because the tag on it was catching on somebody's stocking. I didn't sit in that chair. I stood behind the last row with my palm flat on the cold edge of the marble mantel, and in February that marble is cold enough to make your hand ache. My thumb ran along the seam of my own cuff and stopped, which is how I know what I decided. 75 people were laughing at something Dwayne Fry said. I was looking at a rust-colored vein running corner to corner through the gray. That mantel had been cold under somebody's hand for 116 years, and every one of them had been somebody who lived there. Years before the 9th of March, on a Sunday in this same room, that same marble was warm under my grandmother's hand. The radiator behind it had been running since 6 in the morning. Hazel Kessler stood with her palm flat on the mantel shelf and counted the chairs half aloud, in fives, the way she counted everything. 5, 10. She got to 11 and stopped and said the odd one out loud, because 11 does not divide. 11 people for Sunday dinner. My grandmother was 79. I was 23. I had been working in the back room off the kitchen for 6 weeks with one borrowed machine and a card table, and nobody had told me yet what I was. My mother carved. She always carved, and she always talked while she did it, and the talking was a list of what everyone at that table was going to do. Bianca was engaged for the first time that spring, and my mother laid out the whole year for her between slices. Then somebody down at the end asked me what I was going to do now. I opened my mouth. My mother got there first. 2 fingers went to the base of her throat, just below the notch, and she said it to the whole table. "Rosalind's only ever going to be the one who sews other people's weddings." She said it kindly. That is the part that matters, and it took me a long time to understand why. She said it the way you would say somebody has good handwriting. I watched my grandmother's right hand on the tablecloth. Her index finger moved a fraction of an inch. Once, then again, around the table, one for each head that went down and came back up. Fay Lindstrom nodded with a serving fork still in her hand. Dwayne Fry was there as Grant's brother, 30 years old and already loud, and he laughed and said the crude version of it out loud, the one about what a woman does with her hands and who pays her for it. My mother said, "Honey, don't." She said it the way you'd move a glass away from the edge. Then the table moved on to the ham. 11 nods. I said thank you. That is what I did. I said thank you to my mother for the compliment, and I passed the potatoes to my left, and I asked Fay about the fellowship calendar. At 23, I genuinely thought my mother had said something nice about me in front of 11 people. It took me 9 years to hear the word only sitting in the middle of that sentence, holding it up, the way one basting stitch holds a whole sleeve in place until somebody pulls it. My grandmother said nothing. Not at the table. Not one word about any of it, not to my mother. Not to me. She cleared 8 plates in 3 trips. On the 3rd trip, I followed her with the gravy boat, and in the kitchen doorway, she turned and closed her hand around my wrist. Fay Lindstrom was 2 feet behind her with a stack of plates against her chest, close enough to hear it, and she heard it. "I counted 11 nods," my grandmother said. I asked her what she meant. My grandmother was a woman who counted things she had no intention of mentioning, and I was 23, so I thought the counting was the end of it. She let go of my wrist and went to the sink, and she never answered me. Not that afternoon. Not ever. My grandmother set those plates down in the sink, put her coat on, and drove 4 blocks to a lawyer's office on a Sunday, and I only know that because he wrote it down. Denton Sowell kept a memo of that hour. His daughter read it to me 11 years later, out of a banker's box with her father's handwriting on the end of it. So none of what happened in that office is my memory. It is his in pencil on a half sheet, and I am only repeating it. I was 23 and standing at a sink with a gravy boat in my hands. He lived above the office. That was the whole reason a Sunday worked. She rang the bell at the street door at 2 in the afternoon, and he came down in a cardigan and let her in, and the memo says she did not sit until he did. He offered her the simple version first. "Leave the house to Rosalind. Let Adele live in it as long as she wants. Sign, initial, done." He wrote that he told her it was clean and cheap and there was nothing in it to fight about. My grandmother said no. The memo has her sentence in it, with quotation marks around it, because Denton Sowell was the kind of man who put quotation marks around a thing he did not want to be blamed for later. "Adele will sell that house out from under the only one of them who works in it. Write it so the day she sells, she goes." He asked her whether she wanted to think about it for a week. She said she had thought about it through 8 plates. He wrote it that afternoon. She signed it in front of a notary on Monday, and it was recorded on a Tuesday, and she went home and put a dish towel back on its hook and never said one word about any of it to anybody, including me. She died 2 years after that, in the fall of 2015, at 81, in the front room of that house with the radiator knocking twice and settling. The funeral was at Sedgwick Street Methodist. Afterward, in the church basement, with the coffee urn going and Fay Lindstrom running trays, a woman from Sowell and Bray came across the linoleum and handed me a gray legal envelope with my name typed on it. Not written. Typed on a machine by somebody in an office who did not know me. I opened it standing up, which is the part I would change. Page 1. Grantor, Hazel Kessler. Grantee, Rosalind Kessler. My own name in a box, in a building 4 blocks away, with a stamp on it. I could not hold it. That is the plainest way I know to say it, and it is literal. My hands were not steady enough to hold a piece of paper in a room where my grandmother's coat was still on a chair, so I closed it. I drove home. I put that envelope in the flat file under the pattern paper, and I did not read page 2 for 6 years. The house kept costing money, the way houses do, and I kept paying for it, the way I did. February of 2019, 11 degrees, the furnace quit at 4 in the morning. My mother called me. I live 11 minutes from that house. I was there in 14 because of the ice on Sedgwick, and I sat on the basement steps with a flashlight in my teeth until the man from Vance Heating got there at 7. $5,600. I did not have it that week either. At 6 in the morning, we were in the kitchen and she was making coffee, and I asked her for the third time in 6 years whether we could put something down on paper about the workroom. Not a lease, not rent, just a page saying the back room was mine to work out of, so that it existed somewhere besides the two of us. It was the second time I asked in writing. She poured. She did not turn around. "It's a family arrangement," she said. "Nobody's taking anything from anybody." I said thank you for the coffee. "Here is the ledger, and I am going to give it to you as counts, because I did not let myself feel it for 11 years, and I am not going to start now. Property taxes, $3,840 a year, 11 years. A roof, $9,200. That furnace, $5,600. A water heater, $940. I paid every one of them out of a back room in a house I was told, 4 separate times, not to worry about a piece of paper for. Emmett Doyle had been around about 2 years by that February. He came out in the same weather and parked at the end of the driveway and sat in his truck with the heater running for 2 hours and 10 minutes. He did not come in. He did not call. When I finally came out, he handed me a cup of gas station coffee across the seat and asked one question, which was whether the man had gotten there. He has never once told me what to do about my mother. 2 years after that, in 2021, the county sent a tax notice with the wrong assessment on it, and I went into the flat file to find the legal description of the property, and what my hand came out with was a gray envelope. I sat down on the workroom floor with my back against the cutting cabinets, and I read the whole thing. Out loud, twice, the way I read a pattern, because a pattern lies to you if you skim it, and so does a deed. The house was mine. It had been mine since 2013. My mother had the right to live in it until she died, and that right was hers alone, and it was not small, and it was the only thing she has ever been given in her life. And then the clause. 3 lines. The day she sold, transferred, or permitted the removal of anything attached to that property, her right to live in it ended. Not 30 days after, not at a hearing. That same day. I read it 4 times. Then I did nothing, and I want to be exact about why. Nothing was being sold. And a woman who uses a thing like that is the woman who broke the family, and everybody in Ledyard would have known which one of us that was by Thursday. I had a document in my own house that could end my mother's, and I filed it under the pattern paper, because a thing you never use is easier to carry than a thing you did. So I squared the pages up, slid them back into the gray envelope, and put the envelope back under the pattern paper in the flat file, and shut the drawer with my knee. There was one more sheet in there. I never turned it over. I would not find it for another 3 years. 9 days before the 9th of March, I put my hand flat on the place where that mantel had been, and the plaster was warm. A rectangle of it, raw and gray-white, 5 feet across. 4 lag bolts still standing out of the chimney breast. Above them, a paler stripe of wallpaper where the mantel shelf had kept the sun off for 116 years. The radiator under the front window was going, and the brick behind that wall holds heat, so the plaster was warm. My hand had gone to that spot 10,000 times in 11 years, and it had never once been warm. The truck had come on the Sunday morning after the party. Halloran and Vetch, Terre Haute, painted on the door of a white box truck, backed up the driveway at 7:40 in the morning with the ramp already down. The driver was a man named Ollie Marsh. He wrote things on the back of his own hand instead of on paper, and he did it twice while I stood there in my coat. "You the one who signed?" he said. "No." He looked at the house, then at the clipboard, then at his hand. 20 minutes later, he came out with a cabinet door under his arm and asked me again, the same words, like the first answer had been a misunderstanding about who lived where. "No," I said. "I'm not." They took the walking foot machine first. It was bolted through the floorboards into the joists, so a man with a pry bar had to work the head off the table and cut around 4 of the lags. Then the blind stitch hammer, the same way. Then the 2 cutting cabinets off the wall, which came away in 1 piece each and left the pattern paper on the floorboards, because the cabinets were where the pattern paper lived. Then the mantel, wrapped in 3 packing blankets, carried out through the front door by 2 men walking sideways. When they were gone, I went back and looked at my floor. 8 holes. Sawdust in the grain around every one of them. Pale, still loose, the way sawdust is before anybody walks on it. Vessel and Vine called 11 days before the 9th of March. They were kind about it. They had 900 pieces a season and they could not send volume to a woman with 1 home machine, and they were not wrong. Marquetta Bridal in Indianapolis went on the 5th day before, and they were kinder and it did not matter. Between them, the 2 contracts were about $57,000 a year out of 81. I am not going to tell you what that felt like. I turned a bucket over in the middle of my own workroom and sat on it for 40 minutes and counted the holes in the floor, and every time I got to 8, I started again. My mother called a family meeting in the kitchen 4 days after the truck. That is the phrase she used on the phone. A family meeting. My sister Bianca was at the table with her coffee. Faye Lindstrom was standing at the end of the counter with a clipboard held in both hands, the way she holds everything, so that nobody can put anything into them. "We've decided to do the whole wedding right here in the parlor," my mother said. "The 5th of April. It saves the room fee, it saves the drive, and honestly, the light in there is better." 2 fingers went up to the base of her throat, just below the notch. "Faye's going to shift the rummage sorting to the 7th, aren't you, Faye?" Faye said it was no trouble and did not put the clipboard down. "And we'll need your back room cleared out, honey. It's the only place to stage the food." Then she said it. "It's a family arrangement. Nobody's taking anything from anybody." Junie was at the far end of that table, doing long division with her tongue between her teeth. 9 years old in the sweater I hemmed for her at Christmas. That is why I stayed in the room. I want that on the record, because it was not patience and it was not strength. It was a 4th grader doing homework at a kitchen table, and I was not going to be the noise in that room. So I asked my mother where the $14,600 came from. She said it had been handled. I said I would like to know anyway, and then I did the thing I had not done in 11 years, which was say the numbers out loud in her kitchen. Property taxes, $3,840 a year for 11 years, $42,240. A roof, $9,200. A furnace, $5,600. A water heater, $9,200 twice, for 1 page saying the back room was mine to work out of. 3 of those 4 times I got the same sentence back. Bianca laughed 1 syllable without smiling, the way she does half a second before she answers something. "Roz, you're so good at not needing things," she said. "You always have been." My mother poured herself more coffee. "It was a family arrangement," she said. Emmett brought the mail in that evening and set it on the workroom table under the good lamp. There was an envelope in it from Halloran and Vetch Auctioneers, addressed to the owner of record at 411 Sedgwick Street. They mail the seller copy to whoever holds the property. That is all it was. A clerk in Terre Haute pulling a name off a form. 4 photographs. A stiff buff card in every one of them, punched at one corner, hung on a twist of soft wire. Lot 38, the walking foot. Lot 39, the hammer. Lot 40, the cabinets. Lot 41, the mantel. 41. The tag I had stood beside all night at the back of that parlor had never been on a chair in its life. Somebody cut it off a fixture and dropped it, and Royce Pruitt's crew swept it up with the chair legs. My mother had sold 4 things out of that house and mailed me the list herself, because the county still thought I was the one who lived there. At the bottom, on the consignor line, in handwriting I have known my entire life, was her name. I sat there under the lamp with my thumb going along the edge of the paper, back and forth, the way it goes along a seam allowance when I am deciding whether the seam will hold. 8 days before the 9th of March, I carried that seller copy up a set of stairs above the Farm Bureau office, and the first thing Marguerite Sowell asked me was how I'd gotten hold of it. The radiator under her window ran too hot. The coffee maker had been going since 7. Behind her chair stood a wall of banker's boxes with her father's handwriting on the ends. She put her hand flat on the photographs and looked at me over them. "This is a consignor document," she said. "You don't have any right to one of these. They mailed it to the owner of record." She stopped moving. "And the county says that's you." 11 years. That was the first thing that went right, and I had nothing to do with it. A clerk in Terre Haute pulled a name off a form. The county's own idea of who owned that house put my mother's signature in my hands. Nobody chose it. It came in the mail with the tax bills. Marguerite read the deed twice. She read the clause 3 times. Then she sat back and told me the truth, which is what I was paying her for. A court might not enforce this, she said. Automatic forfeiture reads like a penalty. Judges do not like penalties. You could be right about every word in here and still watch a judge refuse it. I sat in that hot little room with $57,000 a year gone, 8 holes in my floor, and a lawyer telling me the only page I had might be worth nothing. So let me talk to you for a second, because I think you're already here. You're the one whose name is on the check and never on the door. You paid for the roof and you get the folding chair. If you have ever paid for a house you were not allowed to sit down in, type the word owner in the comments. And subscribe before this goes any further, because there is a date in what comes next that I had already picked when I sat in that chair, and I am not going to tell you what it is yet. Marguerite stood up and went into the boxes. She came back with a half sheet of paper in pencil and read it to me out loud, including the part her father had put quotation marks around because he did not want to be blamed for it later. Adele will sell that house out from under the only one of them who works in it. Write it so the day she sells, she goes. That is not a penalty, Marguerite said. That is intent. That is the reason the clause exists, written down 11 years ago in a dead man's file, out of a dead woman's mouth. I did not say anything. I sat there and thought about a serving fork and 11 nods. Now the harder one, she said. 2 machines, 2 cabinets, a mantel. Your mother will say those were furniture and hers to sell. She turned the seller copy around so it faced me. She put 1 fingernail under the printed line beside lot 41 and left it there while I read it. Removed from premises, bolted, joists cut. That's a fixture, she said. The mantel is a fixture. The machines are fixtures. Her own auction house wrote the word for us. Say it. Fixture. Say it so you remember it in a room where I'm not standing. Fixture. The tag had stopped being a description of a thing. It was a description of an act, and my mother had paid a company to write it down. Then the money. $2,200 retainer in a month where 70% of my income had walked out the front door under 3 packing blankets. I sold my grandmother's dress form. I sold a box of patterns from the 1950s with the tissue still folded the way she folded it. A costume shop in Bloomington gave me $900 for the 2 of them, which was fair. Emmett carried the dress form out to the car with both arms around its waist, set it in the back seat, and did not say 1 word about it. The rest went against the recording. In the car afterward, I said it out loud, because I want you to know exactly what I was. I want to call her. I want to call her and fix it. Emmett looked at the road. I'm not going to answer that. Marguerite had laid the rest out in plain speech before I left. The recorder takes affidavits in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Service goes through the sheriff's civil clerk, on the county's rotation, not on mine. I would not be in the room for any of it, and I could not be. And she said that twice, so it would land. So, I decided to say nothing. Not to my mother, not to my sister, not to Faye. 8 days of nodding. A basted seam holds a whole dress together for 1 fitting, and it is meant to. What it isn't meant to do is get worn. I sat in the parking lot on Court Street with the fee agreement folded into my coat and my hands on the wheel and the engine not started yet. My phone lit up on the seat beside me. Faye Lindstrom. 4 days before the 9th of March, Faye Lindstrom came up onto my porch carrying a covered dish with both hands, and she carried it the whole time she talked, so I couldn't hand her anything back. That is not an accident with Faye. A woman holding a casserole in both hands cannot take a page from you. She cannot take a no. She stands on your boards with her arms full and lets you be the one who decides what kind of person you are going to be about it. She had the letter folded lengthwise under her thumb on the lid. 1 page. A use letter, she called it. It said the parlor was available to Bianca on the 5th of April for the purposes of a wedding, and there was a line at the bottom with my name typed under it. Nobody's saying you have to, Faye said. No, I said. I'm only telling you what I heard. You wouldn't want it getting around that the parlor was closed to family. People do talk, and they don't check. The wind came up off the river and moved the corner of the letter, and she did not put a hand out to hold it, because both her hands were under the dish. That smells wonderful, I said. I took the dish out of her hands, and I did not take the letter, and she had to fold it back into her coat herself. My thumb had been going along the seam of my sleeve the whole time she talked, On the porch step it stopped, and I said nothing at all about the 8 holes in my floor. 3 days before the 9th, my sister came to the workroom doorway. She stood in it. She did not come in. She looked at the floorboards, then at my face, and stayed where she was, the way you stand at the edge of water you have decided not to get into. She said she wanted me to give the second toast. At the reception, Bianca said. The second one. It's the better one anyway. Everybody's had a drink by then. I said all right. And Mom's going to put 4,000 toward a new machine. After. After what? I said. She laughed one syllable without any smile on it. After everything settles down. I asked her flat. I asked whether she knew what the $14,600 was made of. She put her thumb on her ring and turned it once around her finger, the same motion our mother makes at her throat, and she said she never asks about money, she has never been any good at it, and she was not going to start 6 weeks out from a wedding. That is the truest thing my sister said to me in the whole of this. She did not lie to me once. She just never asked anybody anything, and she is 38 years old. The day before the 9th, Dwayne Fry stood in my driveway and tapped his ring hand twice on the fender of his truck before he started, which is what he does before he talks over somebody, except there was nobody to talk over. He is out $2,000. He said the number 9 separate times. He said it was the most he had ever handed anybody in his life, and he wanted it back by the 1st of May. He said a person runs a business out of the back room of a house for 11 years, and the county never hears about it, and Adele could mention it, and back tax on 11 years would be a number, and did I want to sit down and find out what kind of number? Then he gave me the sentence, and he gave it slow, so I would have it. You sow other people's weddings, he said. You don't get one. I did not say anything. I counted. 94 seconds, start to finish, and I have never once gotten that count wrong when I tell it. Junie came out of the house in the middle of it to get a library book out of Bianca's car. 9 years old, standing on the outside edges of her shoes on the cold concrete. I am going to say this once. Whatever I was going to do, it was never going to root through that child. I never once thought about where she would sleep. Not that afternoon, not later, not at the counter, not any of it. The 9th of March, my mother put a pen on the kitchen table. There was a bank envelope beside it with the deposit in it, because she was driving it out to the Ashgrove room at 2. There was 1 page. A family use agreement, she called it. 2 fingers went to the base of her throat, just below the notch, and she explained the parlor to me kindly, the way you explain a schedule change. I said that because the room needed a reason, honey. 75 people sitting down have to be told where to look. The front parlor is for the daughter who married properly, and you're welcome to sit with us once you're finished in the back. Then she said it. It's a family arrangement. Nobody's taking anything from anybody. She asked me to sign. I want to be honest about the 4 seconds. For about 4 seconds I was going to sign it, and it was not fear and it was not love. It was that signing is quicker. What stopped me was the radiator under the window knocking twice and then settling, the same 2 knocks it made at my grandmother's table with a ham on it. My mother had never once raised her voice at me, and she had taken more out of that house in one Tuesday afternoon than anybody who ever shouted in it. I put the pen down, not back in her hand, in the middle of the table, exactly halfway, where either one of us could reach it. Honey, she said, we'll talk about it Sunday. I went out through my own back room, 8 holes in the floor and the pattern paper still on the boards, and I did not look down at any of it. 5 days after the 9th of March, my mother opened the pocket doors, and my sister stood on a kitchen chair in the middle of that parlor, getting pinned into a dress by a woman who charged by the hour. The woman had driven up from Terre Haute. $65 an hour. She had pins in her mouth, and she was pinning the side seam with the fabric pulled off the grain, which meant it would hang crooked at the hip the first time my sister sat down. I did not say so. Bianca stood with her arms out and her chin up. Above her there was a rectangle of raw plaster 5 feet across and 4 lag bolts standing out of the chimney breast. Nobody had hung a picture over it. Royce Pruitt was stacking folding chairs against the wall under the front window. He counted them out loud in 5s, the way he does. Faye Lindstrom already had 2 of the rummage tables set up along the far wall because she had moved the sorting to the 7th and she wanted the room learned. Dwayne Fry stood by the coat closet with his hands in his pockets. He was out $2,000 and he had decided that made him staff. I was there for a garment bag I had left in the hall closet. That is the only reason I was in that room. My mother came through from the kitchen with a folder against her chest. It was one page. Printed off the internet, the county spelled right at the top, my name typed into it twice. A quitclaim deed. She laid it on the end of Faye's rummage table, and she set a pen down beside it, and it was the same pen. It was the one that had been lying in the middle of the kitchen table on the 9th. She put 2 fingers to the base of her throat, just below the notch. "Honey, sign this, and none of us ever has to think about a piece of paper again," she said. To me or to Bianca. Either one is fine. It's tidier. She said it the way you would ask somebody to move a car. The woman with the pins in her mouth did not look up. Royce got to 25 and kept going. Faye squared a stack of donated sweaters and kept holding it. Dwayne tapped his ring hand twice on the closet doorframe and said it was about time somebody put that in writing. I want to stop right there, with the pen lying on that table and nobody answered yet. If you have ever been handed a pen in front of people, you already know the trick. The paper is not the pressure. The audience is the pressure. Saying no stops being an answer and starts being a rudeness, and being rude in front of 5 people costs more than a house does. If that has happened to you, tell me in the comments. Tell me about the room you were asked to wait outside of. And subscribe, because the date I told you I had already picked was 2 days out from that afternoon, and I was not going to say one word about it in that parlor. I picked the pen up. Then I put it back down, which was the second time in 5 days. I set it beside the deed, and I asked my mother one question across that room, in front of Royce Pruitt, and a woman with pins in her mouth. I already knew the answer. That is why I asked it. Did you sign the consignment sheet yourself, or did Bianca? My mother did not hesitate, because there was nothing in the question to be afraid of yet. I signed it myself, of course I did, she said. I wasn't going to make your sister do a thing like that. That was all I needed. It was also the only sentence in 11 years that she could not take back, get around, or call something else. Bianca said the first thing all week that was not a compliment. From up on the kitchen chair, arms still out, she asked what a consignment sheet was. Nobody answered her. My mother straightened the deed on the table. The woman from Terre Haute put another pin in the seam that was going to fail. I left. I did not say anything on my way out. Royce Pruitt was at 70 when I passed him in the doorway. 2 days later, on a Tuesday, 7 days after the 9th of March, I went up the stairs over the Farm Bureau office and signed an affidavit of terminated life estate. The seller copy went on the back of it as an exhibit. An exhibit is somebody else's paper doing your talking, Marguerite Soule said. The tag numbers ran down the left margin, 38, 39, 40, 41, and at the bottom of the page was my mother's handwriting on the consignor line. The tag had stopped pointing at anything in that house. It pointed at a hand. Signing took 11 seconds. I counted, because counting is what I do instead of feeling something. Marguerite told me the rest in plain sentences and made me say it back. The recorder takes affidavits in person, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Service goes out through the sheriff's civil clerk, on the county's rotation. Not my order. She said neither one of us got to pick the day. I would not be in the room. She said that was the part that protected me. The recorder's counter is on the ground floor of the courthouse annex. A woman took the affidavit and read the legal description against her screen. Then she brought the date stamp down. Click, then thump. That was the entire reversal, and it was quieter than a sewing machine. I stood there with the stamped copy in my hand and did not feel what I had spent 3 years assuming I would feel. What I thought about was a 79-year-old woman putting her coat on after a Sunday dinner and driving 4 blocks by herself. She never told anybody. Not her church, not her own daughter, not me. She carried it for 2 years, and then she died in the front room with the radiator knocking. My grandmother did the whole thing in one afternoon and then carried it quietly for 2 years, and I had carried it for 3, and neither of us had ever once talked about it to the other. I would give that house back to have one conversation with her about it. That is not a complicated thing to feel, and I am not going to pretend it is. 9 days after the 9th of March, I got the gray envelope out of the flat file to put the stamped copy in with the deed, and for the first time in 9 years, I turned the last sheet over. I did it sitting on the floor. That is where I read things now. The cabinets that used to hold my back were gone, so I had the wall instead, and the pattern paper was still down on the boards. 8 holes. Sawdust gone gray in the grain because people had walked on it. I had the stamped copy in one hand and the deed in the other, and I was squaring them up the way you square two pieces before you pin them so nothing shifts. The deed was 4 sheets. I had read 3 of them out loud twice, 3 years ago on that same floor. The 4th had always been the back of something. A page you have decided is a blank side is a page you stop seeing. It was not blank. 1 sheet of unlined paper, folded in thirds, soft along both folds. My grandmother's handwriting, slanting uphill and getting smaller at the end of every line, the way it did on the backs of her recipe cards. She had dated it the spring of 2015. She had put my name at the top and then a comma, the way you do a letter. I read it out loud, because that is how I read anything that matters. Rosalind Denton offered me an easy one, and I turned it down. He wanted to leave you the house and let your mother stay in it, and that is the clean way. I thought about 3 others before I picked this one. I picked it because it is the only one that cannot be argued with by a person who is very good at arguing, and your mother is very good at arguing, and has been since she was 9 years old. I want you to know I heard what she said at my table. She said, "Rosalind's only ever going to be the one who sews other people's weddings." I counted 11 nods. I sat there in my own dining room, and I did not say one word, and I have been sorry about the nothing ever since. This page is what I did instead of saying something. It is not as good. I know it is not as good. If you are reading this, it means she sold something out of my house, and it means you have to decide, and I am not there to decide it with you. That was the part I could not fix. Love, Grandma. I read it 4 times. That is the same number of times I read the clause, 3 years ago, with my back against cabinets that are in Ohio now. She spelled my name out. Rosalind, not Roz. My mother has written Roz on every card she ever gave me. My grandmother wrote the whole thing, both times, the way you write a name you are not in a hurry with. I folded it back along its own creases and put it behind the deed, and slid the stamped copy in front of both. Emmett made eggs at 9 o'clock at night. He set the plate on the workroom table under the good lamp and ate his standing up, and he did not ask me what the page said. He asked whether I wanted the other 2 eggs. That was the only question. He asked me that night. 11 days after the 9th of March, the sheriff's civil clerk served the notice to quit at 411 Sedgwick Street, on the county's rotation. I want to be plain. I did not know it was that morning. I was in Terre Haute, delivering a gown, pinning a bustle in a stranger's kitchen, and talking about the weather. Faye Lindstrom called me that evening. She wanted to know what I had done. She was holding something while she said it. I could hear it in her breathing, the way a person breathes when both hands are full and will not be emptied. "Rosalind, what have you done?" I said she should ask my mother what she signed. Then I said thank you for calling, because I am who I am. Ollie Marsh came back for a load that did not exist anymore, and nobody at that house could sign for anything by then. He found Emmett in the Pruitt hardware parking lot instead, wrote on the back of his own hand, and said the mantel was already set into a dining room wall outside Cincinnati, and that the buyer had left the tag wired to it because he liked the look of it. So tag number 41 is hanging in a room I will never stand in, over a fire that is not mine, in a house I could not find, doing decoration. 30 days after the 9th of March, on the 8th of April, the Ashgrove Room's cancellation window closed on its own contractual date, and $14,600 stopped existing. Nobody called them. My mother had moved the wedding into a parlor she had since been told in writing to leave. Nobody at that venue had ever met my mother. They just had a date on a form, and the date came, the way dates do. Dwayne Fry's $2,000 went with it. I was not in the room for 1 minute of any of it. I did not pick a single one of those dates, not the rotation, not the window, not the Tuesday. I have thought about whether that makes it cleaner. It does not. It only makes it quieter, and quiet is not the same thing. Emmett came to the back door on the 8th of April with his cap off, held by the brim, turning it a quarter turn at a time. He told me the window had closed at midnight and that nobody at that place had any idea who any of us were. I stood there in a workroom with 8 holes in the floor, and I did not say anything. 32 days after the 9th of March, my mother called and asked me to come to the parlor, and she said the parlor, not the kitchen. She said the parlor the way you say a room you have been asked to leave. The chairs had gone back to Royce Pruitt. The rugs were rolled and standing on end against the baseboard. Over the chimney breast there was a rectangle of raw plaster 5 feet across, 4 lag bolts, and a paler stripe of wallpaper above them. The pocket doors were open. They are always open now. Nobody in that house is ever going to put a shoulder into them again. She had set out 2 folding chairs facing each other in the middle of the floor. Nothing between them. No table, no tray, nothing to put a cup on or a paper on. A room with everything taken out of it gives you nowhere to look. She did not raise her voice. She has never raised her voice at me. "How long did you know?" she said. I told her the truth. 3 years. I said I sat on the workroom floor and read the whole thing out loud twice, and then I put it back under the pattern paper and left it there. "Then why did you wait?" "Because nobody was selling anything." She looked at the plaster when I said it, not at me. Then I said the rest of it, in the same order I said it at her kitchen table. Property taxes, $3,840 a year. For 11 years, $42,240. A roof, $9,200. A furnace, $5,600. A water heater, $940. 4 times I asked for 1 page saying the back room was mine to work out of, twice in writing. 3 of the 4 she answered with the same sentence. She let me finish. She always lets you finish. Then 2 fingers went to the base of her throat, just below the notch, and my mother said the only true thing she said to me in 11 years. "I have been afraid of this house since the day your mother's mother died. I have never in my life owned 1 thing." I counted the seconds after that. 6 of them. "It would have been fine if you'd just been generous about it," she said. "A woman with no children has room to be generous." She added that herself. Nobody asked her for it. I stood up. I looked at the wall where the mantel had been for 116 years, in the room where 75 people had been sitting down when she said it the first time, and I gave it back to her exactly the way she had handed it out. It's a family arrangement. Nobody's taking anything from anybody. I did not explain it. I did not put anything on the end of it. She did not answer, and I walked out through my own back room, and that is the only sentence I ever said to my mother that I am not sure I should have said. Jimena Ruelas was standing by her car in the driveway. She wiped her palms down the front of her apron first, the way she does before she hands anybody anything, and then she held out a stiff buff card on a twist of soft wire. She said it was catching on people's stockings that night, so she cut it off the chair leg with kitchen shears. She said she kept meaning to bring it back. 47 days it had been in her apron. Nobody bid on it. Nobody itemized it. It is the only thing in this whole story that changed hands and had no price on it. Marguerite Soul called that afternoon. She said the machines and the cabinets were a conversion claim, that the number was $41,200, and that she would win it. I told her no. Not for my mother's sake. For mine. I have been that family's ledger for 11 years, and if I took the $41,000, I would be their ledger for 3 more, with a docket number on it. I would rather be broke and finished than owed and ongoing. $41,200 was the price of staying in it, and I had been in it for 11 years, and I could not afford another 3. Here is what it cost. Vessel and Vine gave the volume to a shop in Brazil, Indiana. Marquetta took it in-house. Neither one is coming back. 1 rented machine, $110 a month. 1 leased unit, $440. 11 years of goodwill in the back room of that house, which was never on any consignment sheet and could not have been sold, and is gone anyway. And a sister. I do not get to have one of those. 9 weeks after that party, my mother needed a ride to go look at an apartment by the river, and the woman who drove her was the same woman who'd carried a covered dish onto my porch. Ferris Street. 2 blocks up from the boat ramp. A ground floor, 1 bedroom in a subsidized building with a walkway and a rail and a light over every door. The river comes over that ramp twice a spring. It has never come as far as Ferris Street. Everybody there says so the way people say a thing they are not sure of. I was not in that car. I did not see the building for months, and when I did, it was through a windshield. I heard about it 11 days later through the phone tree from Faye Lindstrom, who by then was calling me every Sunday whether I answered or not. Faye told me my mother had a name for the apartment. She repeated it to me word for word, because Faye repeats everything word for word and always has, and that was the whole trouble with her for 6 years. I am not going to write down what my mother called it. I heard that sentence at a mantel with 75 people sitting in front of me, and I said it back to her in an emptied room, and that is where it stops. She can keep it. It is not coming any further than this. My sister married Grant Fry on the 5th of April, in the Ledyard Township Fire Hall, on folding chairs, with a rented coffee urn on a card table by the bay doors. The dress was the one that got pinned off the grain by a woman who charged $65 an hour, and it hung crooked at the hip in every photograph, and I know that because Junie showed me the photographs, not because I looked for them. 11 months after that, one page came in the mail. It was not an apology. I want to be exact about this, because people hear the word letter, and they fill in the rest. It was a correction of the record. My sister wrote to the fellowship committee at Sedgwick Street Methodist and stated what was actually said at that mantel, in the actual words, and who had paid for the roof and the furnace and the taxes for 11 years. She did not ask them to feel anything about it. She wrote it down and signed it and let it be read out at a meeting she did not attend. My terms are checkable, and I said them out loud to her on the phone so there would be no confusing them later. 1 letter a year. I answer it. That holds for as long as the record stays corrected. If it gets uncorrected, in a kitchen, at a table, to somebody who did not know better, it ends that week. Not gated on being sorry. Sorry is weather. Gated on consistency, which is a thing you can measure. Dwayne Fry I have not been in a room with since he stood in my driveway and tapped a truck fender twice. Not at the fire hall, not at a grocery store, not once. Emmett heard in the fall that he moved the glass shop over to the east side of Indianapolis and heard it from a man at the county garage, and I have no idea whether it was the $2,000 or the talk or the rent. I did not arrange that. Nobody in this story arranged it. He simply went, and I have stopped looking up when a truck slows down on Court Street. The phone tree that carried the pressure carries my mother now. Her rides, her groceries, her news, in both directions. Somewhere in those 9 weeks it decided on its own who had been wronged, and it is not shy about it, and there are 4 women in that church who will say so to your face in the parking lot. I did not ask for that, and I would rather they hadn't. A network that turns on somebody in 9 weeks is a basted seam. It holds beautifully for one fitting. It is not something you build a life on top of, and I am not going to lean on it, and I have said that to 2 of them directly. Junie is 10 now. She comes up the outside stairs 2 Saturdays a month, and she sits at the rented machine, and she is learning to run a hem, a straight one on scrap, at half speed, with her tongue between her teeth the way she does long division. She is patient in a way nobody in my family is patient. I hope she gets to be good at something before anybody tells her what she is. She asked me a question the first Saturday, when I was showing her how the presser foot comes down. She looked at the table legs and then at the floor, and she said, "Does this one have to stay in the floor?" I told her no. I told her, this one is rented and it sits on a table, and it can go wherever I go. Lot 38 was the walking foot machine, 39 was the hammer, 40 was the cabinets, 41 was the mantel. There was never a 42. There is no lot 42 anywhere in the world. The tags stop at 41, and that is the only inventory I keep now. The stitch nobody sees is the one holding the whole dress together. That is the whole thing. And it comes to 3 items. A deed nobody read. A floor with 8 holes in it. A tag on a wire. A year and 1 month after the 9th of March, the unit above Pruitt Hardware costs $440 a month, and the floor slopes an inch toward the front windows, so a spool of thread will travel if you set it down and turn around. The stairwell smells like cut keys and fertilizer. Royce Pruitt has never once mentioned the party, or the chairs, or the 79 he took back. There is still no table. Emmett Doyle and I eat off our laps out of the same pan, sitting on the floor with our backs against the wall, and tag number 41 hangs from a nail over the machine where I can see it from where I sit. If you are still here, do one thing before you close this. Send it to the one in your family who gets called when the furnace quits at 4 in the morning, the one who pays and never gets asked to sit down. They will know by the second minute why you sent it. Then tell me in the comments, and tell me honestly, because I am not sure I was right, would you have taken the $41,200? I did not. I would rather be broke and finished than owed and ongoing, and if you think that is a mistake, say so. And if you believe the stitch nobody sees is the one holding the whole dress together, Subscribe, because that is every story on this channel. The spool rolled to the window again while I was saying that.